Hello and welcome back to the Vintage Podcast, where this week we'll be talking to Joe about Whiskey 101. Now this episode's going to be just like last week's one with Patrick, except obviously we'll be switching topics from wine to whiskey. Hopefully you've been enjoying the show so far. If you have, don't forget to follow us and don't forget to check out the links down below where we put in featured products every time we mention them. You can check them out on our website where we deliver all across the British Isles. You can also get in touch with us via the links in the descriptions where you can ask us questions for future episodes or just about our products in general. But for now, on with the show. So we're back again. This is episode 2 officially of the Vintage Podcast, and we're here this week with Joe. Don't know, Joe, if you want to introduce yourself or if you want me to ask you a couple of questions about who you are. But
I suppose I should do a little bit of talking about myself.
A little bit.
So been working at the Vintage for 4 years now. Started off part-time like a lot of us did and kind of worked my way up from there, kind of learning along the way. Learned quite a lot and really got into whiskey, hence today's episode.
Okay, cool. And we will have, so there will be a whole segment or section at some other time about who you are in a bit more detail, like we had with Paddy in the first episode. But all I'm going to do today is take you through, similarly to the previous episode, what we'll title Whiskey 101, the same way we did with the previous one. So basically what I want to start with is wine seems to have quite a lot of differentiation between appreciation and tasting in ways. Is it the same with whiskey, or would you kind of see that there's a different series of processes to go through?
Yeah, when it comes to like tasting whiskey, there's definitely ways you can do it. I'm a big advocate in just drink what you like and not necessarily get it down you, but just enjoy what you want. I always advise to smell the whiskey first, get a little bit of a taste before you take a mouthful or whatever, just to get used to it a little bit. And really try and enjoy it that way rather than downing whiskey. And I think the whiskeys that a lot of people will be drinking would be a little bit better quality, so that they would be, you should taste it a little bit more than trying to knock it back a little bit.
Just take a little bit of time, really.
Yeah.
Okay. And we talked about the value of wine on the last one as well, to some extent, about how you can gear yourself towards different price ranges depending on where you are in your journey, I suppose, and what you understand and what you're kind of doing at the same time. But would you say to anyone who's not that into whiskey yet, is there a price range that you should aim for, or does it scale with price, or is there like is price and quality, are they directly proportional and that kind of thing?
I think just like wine, I think there is definitely a proportionality to it. They do, like, the more expensive you get, the better it gets. I do think though at a certain point it exponentially gets more expensive. I tend to stick around. I've always said I'll never buy a bottle of whiskey over £100. The reason being is, I think that yes, you can have whiskies more than £100. I think there is a market for that. I think for someone like myself who just likes to enjoy a whiskey when they get home from work, a couple on a Friday or Saturday night, I think if you're spending more than £100, I think it's a little bit lost on me in a way, if that makes sense. I think when you're starting out on whiskies, I would probably advise hitting around the 25 to 40, 50 pound mark. I think there's, especially, I'm a bit more of an Irish whiskey drinker than I am Scotch or anything else. I think there's some fantastic examples in that price range, and there's a lot to explore as well within that price range, that for your average drinker, you don't have to spend a lot to start with, especially. I think your first, not to put a time limit on it, but your first year, I don't think you really need to spend too much money to really enjoy whiskies at that price.
And when you say, so you talked about your sort of Friday, Saturday evening sort of thing, would you put a bit of process into that, or is that just purely for your enjoyment?
A bit of both, to be honest. If it was a new bottle I was just opening, I would definitely take some time. I wouldn't just go sit on the sofa while watching TV. I'd definitely take some time to taste it. Actually try and pick out some tasting notes, give it a smell, see what I can pick out, and sort of those sorts of things. Try and figure out why, if it's a single pot still, why you're getting certain flavours and stuff that, and think about it that way. But then after that, I wouldn't say
there's too much thought involved. Okay.
Yeah.
And you've said you did say some tasting notes as part of that previous answer, but are there things you're looking out for in ways, or does it come in, like we were talking about how Paddy recommends you would drink wine, like 3 sips kind of gets you into what the wine actually is offering? Is there a similar sort of thing, or do you look for like a beginning, middle, end sort of thing?
I think it's to be honest, I think tasting whiskey and all spirits wine, I think is very similar. Like Paddy said, the 3 tastes, you have that first one, it kind of, the initial shock, especially when you're drinking a straight whiskey, it's like 40+% alcohol. That first taste can sometimes put you on the back foot a little bit.
Yeah.
The second one, you're starting to get a bit more flavors, and then the third one, you really start to get the flavors. But when we're saying sips, especially with whiskey, the little small sips, just to coat the mouth. And you are definitely trying to, on the second and third, trying to pick out a bit more flavors. Okay. You can obviously get some on the initial, but you really start to pick them out on the third and fourth.
And are there obvious flavors or common ones that you would get a lot of the time? Or say if you had a certain cask finish or a certain kind of whiskey from somewhere specific, are there flavors to be expected depending on what's on the bottle?
Yeah, definitely. So talk about Irish first, you're definitely looking out for like biscuit, caramel, those sorts of flavors. If they're an Irish whiskey finished in, say, like a sherry or like a fortified wine cask, Marsala, Malaga, those sorts of things, you're looking like dry fruit sort of flavors.
Okay.
With bourbon casks, you tend to get a bit more of a spice. Irish whiskey as a whole, you get like general would be a sweeter style of whiskey.
Yeah.
When you go to Scotch, especially like your Islay Scotches and stuff like that, they use a lot of peated malt, so you do get them smoky sort of those sorts of flavors coming through. A lot of American stuff, because it's sort of new oak, a lot of vanilla, a lot of spice, bit of sweetness as well because they use corn.
Yeah.
A lot of the time.
Right. Yeah.
Not all the time. And then Japanese kind of follows Scotch. There's a little bit of smokiness there. So it definitely does change where you get it from, just because of the rules and regulations and stuff like that, and how things are aged. If you look at, like, if a bottle says straight on it and it's American, it has to be new oak, so stuff like that can really impact the flavor of the whiskey. Whereas like Irish is a bit looser, that's why you see a lot of bourbon casks, sherry casks, those sorts of things. Scotch has a couple of regulations with regards to that, but it's a little bit looser than your straight American stuff. So you definitely can get different flavors, but it's really interesting to try them as well, to try and find
to see if you can start to determine what how they interact. If without going too much down the distillery tour route right now, do you know much about the rules differentiating Scotch, bourbon, Irish, things like that? I think I do know the base things. In my personal time, I do like to try and sit down and do a bit of research on things. But there's so many, and some of them can get quite strict. So, for example, Irish whiskey, it would be relatively loose with some of the rules anyway. With like the mash bill and stuff like that. So the mash bill is what the grains and stuff goes into it. But it has to be made it has to be aged for at least 3 years. It has to be made on the island of Ireland. That is from the very start right until you put it in a bottle and you ship it off. Scotch, I think it's a minimum of 2 years if I remember correctly. A couple more regulations with regards to the barrels and stuff like that. Same thing as Irish, it has to be produced, bottled in Scotland. American, it kind of depends on the style of whiskey. So bourbon would be the most popular when it comes to American whiskey. So you have to be at least 51% corn, at least 2 years aged in new American oak. And then if you see like Tennessee whiskey, it takes it a step further where it has to be, I think it's maple charred filtration. So basically after distillation, they filter it through basically charred maple trees. So there is quite a few different rules and regulations. It's quite interesting, but there's quite a lot to remember and learn and stuff like that. I remember a few years ago trying to listen to a couple of friends talk about the different elements of different kinds of whiskey from different places, and it's very easy to get lost, which is part of the reason why we want to do this kind of thing, is so that it can break it down a little bit, and hopefully we'll get questions as we go with, and we'll welcome people to ask those questions
100%.
on how we can break this down further, because it's not a minefield as such, more of just like this huge wall of information a lot of the time, and it can be quite good to find a way to scale it essentially. So it's good.
Yeah, I still find it difficult even now. I mean, I've been drinking straight spirits for 3-ish years now. Only really been drinking whiskey for 2.5 of that time. And even now, like, I still get confused with the different naming of like single malts and stuff like that.
Okay.
So that's why I'd always recommend a new drinker, especially, just find a bottle, listen to people recommending them if you can get tasters and stuff like that, and just go out and try it. Because there's a lot of people that would look at a bottle, and if it doesn't say, for example, single malt would be a really big one. If it doesn't say single malt, they would be it would be a no. They don't think it's as good, but I don't think that's necessarily true. The example I always give is one of the best known wines is Bordeaux. Yeah. And it's a blend. So why can't whiskey also be a blend? Like, there are some really good blended whiskies out there as well, if that makes sense. So just because it says a certain thing on the bottle, I'd not necessarily discount it. I'd definitely always give it a go.
And would yeah, definitely. Would you? So one way I found was quite handy for getting into the process of introducing myself to stuff was to go to distillery tours and to try things directly from the people who were making it. Yeah. Would you recommend that as a way to get into things, or would you kind of go on a smaller scale where you're talking to an individual, or what is there something different or better that you can do? I
think I'd always recommend distillery tours. Okay. I think they are a good way to learn the history and processes and stuff like that. But what you do find, obviously, it's a really stupid thing to say, but what you do find with a distillery tour is they're just going to push their whiskey. That's the only thing they're going to push. Even if you ask them about a different whiskey or a different type that they don't necessarily do, they'll kind of not really talk about it as much, kind of brush over that sort of thing.
Kind of a captive market in a way. Yeah. Okay.
What I'd recommend is chatting to someone like us, or sending you questions here, or your local off license or whiskey seller, I suppose, and just having that conversation about what they enjoy and stuff like that. But yeah, if you are near a distillery, you are a local distillery, definitely give it a go. Yeah, okay. But just remember the fact that they're at the end of the day, they're trying to sell their product as well. So
which ones have you done just off the back of that?
So Bushmills I've done a few times. The McConnell's one up at the Crumlin Road Jail in Belfast, so it was a really good one. I've done the Bow Street Distillery down in Dublin as well. Okay. A couple of others.
Fair enough.
A couple of different things. So.
And within, so obviously then you've seen different parts of the process in different ways as well. I went to one Scottish one, which then obviously provides you with a little bit of a different process. Do you find, from having seen that and having observed, or even just witnessed how they differ between each other, are there any elements of the process that give you like favorite outcomes, or like finishes or types of cask or anything like that?
To be honest, when you go to a distillery tour, a lot of them are quite guarding of their barrels and stuff, but you definitely do taste the difference in the final product, and they do definitely talk you through that sort of thing. So not to get too in detail with the process, but you start with the mash, which is basically your grains and stuff all mashed together, and you introduce the water and the yeast, and you let it ferment. A lot of distilleries will talk about what they particularly use and their ratio and their mash bill and stuff like that, and then they'll talk about how they distill from that. They'll talk about whether double, triple distilled, or sometimes even single distilled, depending on. It's very rare to find that, but sometimes it does happen. And then they'll talk about their aging, but it's very close guarded secret normally about that sort of like where they're. Yeah. Like we asked the question the first times I went to the McConnell's distillery, and they wouldn't tell us where the barrels are. Right. Just it may have just been at that time they just didn't want to say, but it's just.
Which I find funny, because then when you go to Bushmills,
Yeah.
You walk outside and there's just like 1,000 barrels just stacked up in the car park.
Bushmills is very impressive because
Yeah.
they've been going since whatever year it was. It probably says on my t-shirt, but they've been going for a very long time. So they've been collecting barrels.
1600s.
Yeah,
it is.
66, something like that. They've been collecting barrels for a long time, and as we've seen from their Causeway collection, it's not just bourbon casks, not just sherry casks. They have a wide variety of different things as well. Yeah. There's so many things aging there as well. So I think with Bushmills, it's just like a look what we can do, look how much we have. It is, because it feels very, very impressive.
Yeah, it feels massively industrial in a way that's meant to show you just how big they are. Yeah. But then, so we've kind of been through a lot of the elements of the making of it. Yeah. Would you think, so if we had someone listening now who hasn't tried whiskey and has never had any success trying whiskey, do you think there's hope for anyone to kind of get into it? Because I know that at times I've seen it as nonsense, but have since massively come around to the idea of being a whiskey drinker and an enjoyer of it. Do you think that's available to everybody?
Yeah, I think it's mostly about finding the right style, the right oftentimes right distillery or like right bottle even. There's a few people I know they have the one, but they've tried loads of different things. They still experiment with different things, but you still have that one that you go back to. And I think you will find that, but it is a case of just trying to find that one that you really enjoy. But going back to a previous point there, it is a case of not just saying single malt or not just saying this or not saying that. You do diversify and try different things.
Yeah, by being open-minded.
Even at around that 30 to 40, 50 pound mark, that you can try multiple different things. We would have plenty on our shelves around that price point that you could try single malt, single pot stills, single grains. You can try blended whiskies. There's a whole variety of things that you could try. So
it's that open-mindedness. And then, so if these people were interested, again, you talked about visiting local places like us and things like that. Is there something you would recommend to anyone to do, kind of if they wanted to take that step? Is there a process, or you can say no. You can kind of say that it's a matter of just trying or buying, or
well, something I probably should have mentioned at the start, but there's like the way you dilute as well your drinks. Like no one starts off on straight spirits. Yeah. So if you are looking to try and get into it, I think like diluting it with a little bit of water or an ice cube or something like that could really help. If that answers.
It does. The product placement element I was looking for was the wine tasting and spirit tasting events that we run.
Yeah, we do them as well. Yeah.
So it's just in case that was on your mind. But either way, what I'll do is the same as we talked about the previous time. For anybody who is interested and is moderately local and can get the train or can get driven over, we do run events where you can try different products from not just local producers. There are
we're trying to push it can be hard to push a little bit further afield with like trying to get people over and stuff like that, but we are trying our best to try and do that. There's one bourbon distillery in particular that we have a rep who is local to us that could potentially do one, so we are looking at that as a possibility, because I think that would be a really good one, because as you can imagine, it would be quite hard trying to get a bourbon distillery to do a tasting in Northern Ireland. But I think there is an opportunity there that we could
get that in. Yeah. If that is something that interests people, I'll put the availability for joining that mailing list in the description of this episode, wherever you might find it. So if that's something you do like the idea of, the only thing that email address ever sends out is ticket availability. So feel free to join that. And then to finish us off for today, are there a range of products or a single product or anything in particular that you have your eye on, or that you will repeatedly go back to, or you're finding that right now is your thing that you would recommend to anybody else?
So for I'll give examples of a couple of different ones. So with Irish, McConnell's to me is always a go-to. The 5-year bourbon cask is really good in cocktails, all that sort of stuff, or if you want to drink it straight. And their sherry cask as well has a nice that sweetness we were talking about earlier with that.
I can actually back it up because I've tried those as well.
If you want to spend a little bit more, Green Spot
would
always be. I've got, so they have a range of 4. They have the original and then they have 3 wine casks. I've got them all in that and I have them all open. They're absolutely fantastic. But the original is very, very good. If you're looking like American bourbon, I would start with Buffalo Trace. I think that is fantastic for the money that you pay for it. Scotch isn't my biggest thing, but I quite like the Glenfarclas, the 10-year-old. It's really good. It's not. It does have a little hint of peat there, but it's really not overpowering because it's from. I want to get this right. I think it's Speyside. So they use a lot less peat, if any at all. I could be mistaken on it, but there is a little hint of smoke, and it's not too much. But I think if you are looking to start out, I think they're very good ones to go for.
Excellent. And what I'll do is, like everything else, I'll make them available for you to go. They're all available through us, aren't they?
Yes, they're all available on our website.
I will make that easy to access, basically, for anyone who is interested in trying any of those things. But no, for today, all I'm going to do is wrap it up from here. So thank you very much, Joe, for joining us. I know that you'll be on and off loads and loads of times in the future, so hopefully we'll get to know you a lot more as time goes on. But thank you for sharing all that information with us. Hopefully we'll get loads of questions to follow up and keep developing on this. And please do ask those questions. We'll give you ways to ask them through different channels and things. But for now, we'll just see you next time. Thanks so much for listening to the Vintage Podcast. Everything on this show is produced in-house, including the music. If there's anything you'd like to ask us, or if you'd like to pose a question for a future episode, check out the links in the description where you'll be able to find contact forms, email addresses, and social media links, as well as links to any of the products that we've mentioned on the show. If you want to follow us just to keep up to date with episodes, you should be able to do so on most major podcast platforms. And if you want to ask us about anything, we're always here to talk. Please don't forget to follow the show, and we look forward to hearing from you in the near future. Thanks.